So I can tell you a little bit more about our next speaker. Steven Dow, do I have you on the line?
I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming. The two-way team did a great job this morning, and I know people are looking forward to hearing from you. So folks, we've got Steven Dow with us, who's the Director of Design for San Diego. He is Associate Professor at the Department of Cognitive Science at UC San Diego, where he explores human-computer interaction, crowdsourcing, creativity. Steven received the National Science Foundation Career Award in 2015 for his research on advancing collective innovation. Steven, I'll go ahead and stop sharing now, and I will turn things over to you. And if you need any assistance with the Google Meet, happy to provide it.
Let's see how this goes. Hi, everyone. You guys see me?
Yeah.
Hi, Steven Dow here. Sorry about that technical difficulty. So I'm a faculty member at UC San Diego in the Cognitive Science Department. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about some of our research and how it ties into this program we started called Design for San Diego. And hopefully those slides will pull up because we need to, I actually need to teach a class here in about 20 minutes, but it's been really interesting working in this virtual space, working with technology really to think about how people innovate together, how we come up with solutions and sort of innovate for the city. And why it's been interesting, I think, is because really I'm a tech fan. I'm a fan of technology and the potential that technology can bring us together and allow us to sort of accomplish things and reach for heights that we haven't before. So in some ways, like this opportunity to work virtually has really played into our research interests and what we're trying to achieve. And so what I'm going to start off talking about in my talk is how what we do as a research team is study how communities design together. We're very interested in the kind of setting where people come together to share ideas, to dig into problems that face their community. We actually have done lots of observational studies of how people work together. If you want to go to the second slide, you get in there. And so we've been looking at these settings where people get together and solve these challenges. And through these observations, I've come to believe that design and problem-solving skills are a wonderful, empathetic, human-centered approach to solving problems, but that the process alone is not enough. The design process and how we go about it is not enough. There are challenges that are too big and too messy for just a single room of people to solve. And so, yeah, slide 3, how can we solve these truly wicked problems that are too vast, complex, and interconnected for any one room of people to solve? And so, like, we certainly should teach people about design and entrepreneurship and innovation and learn how to arm yourself with the modern problem-solving skills that any one person should have. But that's not enough. It's not enough because a single team, no matter how diverse, hardworking, talented, thoughtful, can only explore a problem within their capabilities. Next slide. And so due to limits on time, mobility, skills, or costs, single teams can only explore so many questions, so many alternatives, so many different framings around a particular problem. And so I argue that truly complex problem solving requires collective effort. Sorry. And so I argue that it requires collective effort and not the kind where you put everyone together in a space and see what happens. And I mean that both virtually and physically, just like tossing people in the same space. There's a place for that, certainly in protesting. But if we really want to get into the meat of the problems, we need to carefully structure how people interact through socio-technical systems. socio-technical systems, which I'll go into later. And so what my group does is we focus on how to create social computing technologies to help support this collective design effort. And as one example of that, if you go to the next slide, we created a system, an online system called Community Crit, as in community critique, which is intended to supplement the kinds of conversations that happen in those public workshops. The community is invited to view proposals for urban design type of challenges, like how to revitalize problematic intersections. And our tool is designed for mobile phones and borrows ideas from crowdsourcing, where we try to help people make meaningful contributions in a small amount of time. And so if you go to the next slide, there, participants are led through this process where they learn about a proposal, and then people can perform micro activities around that proposal, elaborating the proposal, critiquing the idea with certain considerations, rating the concept on different dimensions. As one example of this flow, say the first community member comes along, might create a proposal for a tower as part of an urban development effort. They may even sketch it and upload it during a physical workshop. So then they go to the online platform, they upload this image, you go to the next slide, and then the second community member would come along and do a short set of activities around that idea. Next slide. So we had several canned questions, like in this example, participants might be asked to pose a question for other community members. What question would you like to ask other people about this idea? And in that case, they enter a question, and the third member would come along to respond to that question, giving this, this really nice, rich, layered data set about how the community is thinking about ideas, improvements, and all the details that go into the ideas. And then in the end, the community submitted a bunch of different proposals, and we got input on each proposal. Next slide. And next slide. There's a little animation there that we didn't get to see. So you see, a lot of involvement. Actually reminds me a lot of the two-way system that was proposed this morning. And what we heard from qualitative feedback when we took this out and tried it with people, next slide, is that participants really liked that Community Crit allowed people to provide input in small bursts of time. So I don't have time to go to the workshops, so it provided me an opportunity to give input. Compared to lengthy surveys, which are excessive to the point of endangering the data collection, this was nice. I only had 5 questions to answer. And so that's how the users felt. And then going on to the next slide, even the urban planners saw value in this kind of public outreach. They saw how it could provide a chance to present ideas back to the community in a kind of an online forum. That it gave them a chance to get input from the public so that they could take into the next workshop. They very much brought the mentality of, and I think that's true, is that the physical events are the main anchors for the activities that go on in a co-design situation, but there needs to be this online aspect as well to complement it. However, some of the participants, some of the urban planners also kind of viewed it negatively, if you go to the next slide, saying that it gave voice to people who are too lazy to get off the couch and come to the workshop. So just interesting perspective here that some planners express skepticism and kind of reinforces that view that face-to-face meetings might be the only place where design can happen. But we've, I think, demonstrated that this tool, the Community Crit tool, can provide a structured approach for enabling a large community to come together and constructively contribute and elaborate on proposals. And so that's sort of an introduction as one example of my group's research on collective innovation. If you go to the next slide, we are interested in creating technologies for a range of activities that groups need to do when they come together to solve challenges, from scalable brainstorming, sense making, doing feedback exchange when ideas have been proposed. Team formation is a key bit because we're always working together with others in small units, and consensus building. Once you have proposals, how do you decide what moves forward? And so we've developed a number of these strategies and built tools to support them in our lab. And then we tested them out in classrooms or, online with kind of, crowd workers and that sort of thing. But we really felt compelled to make impact in the community, in the real community of San Diego. And so in order to test these tools, to be able to have an opportunity to understand how they play out in the wild, we needed to create an impetus for action, an impetus for people wanting to come together. And what we did to respond to that was created this initiative called Design for San Diego, or D4SD for short. And this is a collaboration, next slide, with the UCSD Design Lab. It's a citywide design challenge where citizens are invited to address problems around sustainability, like transportation and all the many threads from commuting to parking, accessibility, bikeability, preparing for autonomous vehicles. And we kicked off in 2017 with an event at Scale SD headquarters, next slide, with San Diego Mayor Faulkner, the UCSD Chancellor Khosla, design guru Don Norman helped to kick off the event. Next slide. And over the course of several months, hundreds of people came out and participated in different ways, through workshops, through these hackathon events. It was really great to get people together. And I think it produced a lot of really solid ideas, like, next slide, beach access for all. And then next, a center for helping people get more comfortable with the experience of riding in an AV. Next slide, a system here for embedding sensors on a bike and alerting drivers about the nearby bikes to improve safety on the streets. Next, and the winning team was not just a group of professional designers, but a team of high school students. And for me, really providing validation that everyday people can come together from the community. They have ideas, they have energy, they have optimism, they want to create change, and we can harness that and we can coordinate that. And so this was back in 2017. As researchers, we're really interested in studying the underlying mechanisms of how innovation works. And so one of the studies that we did, next slide, my collaborator, Brian McGinnis, did a pretty interesting analysis of community discussions around the D4SD competition. All of that happened on Slack. And one of the interesting details that came out of that work that we published in a 2018 paper had to do with how conversations unfolded over time. Next slide. If we look at the volume of messages each day during the competition, it was about a 60-day period of time that we hosted these activities. You can see we marked the date where the mayor came and spoke, and the day where we started some studio sessions, and the competition deadline. But now if we look at where the community is posting message and what kind of messages they're posting, next slide, public discussions around the problem space are marked here in yellow. Questions about the process or comments about the process in green. And then private team-only conversations are marked in blue. And what you can see here, next slide, is that we found that the team registration deadline seemed to mark a key transition. Before team registration, it was mostly a community-wide discussion, a lot of talk about process, about the problem areas, sharing information across the whole group of people. But then on the next slide, we found very little interaction in the public channels, and all of it went into the private team channels where, information was not being shared between teams. And next slide, several participants actually noticed this trend. One saying Slack was effective in showing the problem space in each topic area and helping to guide some research into the problems. However, due to the competitive nature of the challenge, people stopped sharing. And so, after a brief hiatus, we brought D4SD back this year in 2020. We took some time to reflect and think about what D4SD means, what the project, the initiative, how it should be structured and how we should think about it. Should it be a competition or should it be something else? And next slide, we brought back the program at D4SD 2020. We were all set to have this great big event at the downtown library, and then COVID hit. And our team hit, very nimble team, wonderful team. Michelle Morris, Jennifer Taylor, Brian McGinnis, Steve McNeil, Eric Heckler, many, many others coming together to host this year. We're a nimble team. We managed to pivot and focus on challenges related to the pandemic. And we moved all our events online, next slide. And so, our event turned out looking more like this. Many of you are probably quite familiar with this look. But we also made some changes to how D4SD was set up this time to be less of a competition. So one of the things we did is we went out and built up next slide, an Educators Alliance in collaboration with the community team at the Design Lab. And through this alliance, we were able to get high school teachers interested in kind of guiding their students through the process. In fact, we had K through 12, we had college-aged classrooms, we had a bunch of after-school programs that were interested in engaging in the citywide challenge. Hundreds of people actually participated throughout the year. Next slide. We also brought together a fantastic set of organizations as sponsors and partners in this effort. Scale and Downtown Works have both been great in partnering with us. And next slide, we also opened up the problem space a bit more, not just focused on mobility, but also bringing in challenges related to health, housing, and environment. Next slide. But most importantly, we really started to think of D4SD as an initiative that sits at the intersection of education, research, and research on coordinated problem solving and community building. And so it's really had these three components coming together. Next slide. And each of these really had a social and a technical layer. On the educational side, we are bringing together design mentors and creating a set of materials for human-centered design learning activities. On the research side, coordinating efforts with facilitators and civic researchers who are going to map out the different problems in the space, and building a set of social computing technologies to try to support it, the initiative. And then on the community side, really trying to motivate citizens and leaders to come together into these forums, both virtual and physical, to see how they can personally contribute to our city. And so next slide, we were really thinking about research questions around this. And one of those that I really wanted to highlight was how we've been thinking about how to support teams. And so this is a new project. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a glimpse of it. And so, teams, we could go on and on about teams, but we'll say that teams are very important for providing encouragement, for achieving more than an individual can alone. But there's some interesting issues around teams. If they're too big, they don't get as much done because there's coordination costs. You have to communicate with everyone in the team. You have to keep them up to speed. And the more the more people you have, the harder it is to kind of coordinate that effort. And so we create these team structures, small groups of people, to try to get somewhere and to innovate. And the research suggests that teams are best when they balance for individual characteristics like skill diversity and domain knowledge and emotional intelligence. And while I don't necessarily refute any of these points, we've been focused more on intangible factors like trust, rapport, and familiarity. And to this extent, we've been taking cues from a technique called speed dating, next slide, to create a technique called team dating, where you network in a sense with a bunch of different people and understand the potential for teamwork based on the rapport that you notice. And it really builds on this idea of thin slicing. Can we get a good sense for the potential of this team interaction just from a short date, a short interaction with them. And the method had been sort of demonstrated in online studies, but hadn't really been tried out in kind of a physical event, like a hackathon or a workshop where people actually come together, hoping to find a team, hoping to like create that unit to work together on an innovation. And so we developed a platform we called ProtoTeams, next slide, that would enable team formation within a physical space, within a co-located crowd of people. And we developed it for the mobile application. And we asked people in a room, very much like a classroom or a hackathon, to take out their phones, and they enter their preferred name, what they want to be called. And then next slide, what they see is on their phone a unique shape color on their phone. So a blue orange circle or a red triangle or a blue moon. And then they hold up their phones and they find the other people in the room that have that same shape color combination. And this allows us to quickly and dynamically put people into groups. And it's kind of neat because doing this digitally offers several benefits. Next slide. For example, you can prompt people with discussion questions. You can have discussion prompts. You can do icebreakers. You can have short quizzes that you do together. You can put games on this platform. And then perhaps more importantly, after you have them interact in a short amount of time, next slide, you can ask them for a little bit of input on their experience interacting with the group. How likely would you want to work with this person again? How much did you get to know the other people? And so we're collecting a little bit of data there on the spot as well. And then you can go through several rounds of this. And what you can get is actually kind of an affinity matrix of how the people relate to each other and how we might be able to actually help form teams from that point forward. The next slide is actually a video, which you won't be able to see because it's just a PDF, but it shows how it works. The next slide shows the teams after they had formed. This is in a classroom that I tried it out. And so we're working on this now. We've tried it out in probably a dozen classrooms now, and really shows, I think, has a lot of value in terms of just getting diverse people to mix, in terms of collecting data that can be used later to help people connect. And it's been a lot of fun. Last two slides, just a quick overview. Here again are those areas of research. If you're interested in any of this, please let me know. And that's the end of my 10 minutes. I hope that was not as painful as the start of it was. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Steven. Certainly, when it comes to things like being in downtown works to be able to all collaborate together, we're missing that. I think we have beer and wine at some point this afternoon. And certainly your topics are so relevant for this audience. I know as COVID hit, it was like everybody was scrambling to go figure out, what online collaborations tools to use. So thank you. That was very helpful. I know you've got a class to run off to. And to announce.
That was great. I want to check in with everyone later and hear how it went. If I didn't have this class, I would absolutely hang around because I want to know who comes out on top on this competition. But thank you, Erin. Thank you, Daniel. And I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you. I was jealous of your big check. We'll get that for next year.
Bye-bye.